It's an info war. There's no doubt about that. It's a full-on info war. My name's Jim Haslam. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a virologist. I'm what's called a lab leaker. I'm someone that's spent a lot of time online debating the origins of COVID-19. And I've written a 450-page book coming to my own conclusion, which is pretty different than the mainstream narrative. So my narrative holds that this was an accident, but it was a lab leak. It was not a virus, though. It was a vaccine. It wasn't a human vaccine. It was an animal vaccine. I contend that SARS-CoV-2 was technically what's called a bat vaccine. That is a very crazy concept for a lot of people. This distant mammalian ancestor of ours, 65 million year old, bat, essentially, was this target of this vaccine that we now call SARS-CoV-2. So that is the book I've written, and there's a bit of a plot twist in it. So I start off this book in the here it is right here. I start off the book in the Wuhan BSL-4. This is the giant biolab that we've all seen on the pictures of Wuhan. So in the remote areas of Wuhan is this BSL-4, and inside this BSL-4 was a Western woman. I'll mention her name. She's Danielle Anderson, and she's inside this BSL-4 from June of 2019 until October of 2019. And she left Wuhan in November of 2019. And she told the world later on she was working on Ebola. And we all accepted it because that's what you do in the big BSL-4 labs with the big BSL-4 spacesuit. And I noticed, though, that her story didn't quite add up. So I hit the rewind button when this document, this US American document, was leaked about a year into the lab leak, September of 2021 to be exact. This DARPA diffuse document was leaked. And in this DARPA diffuse document, this US military document, there is a woman named Danielle Anderson in it. And I, cross-referenced it with the woman that's in the Wuhan BSL-4. And she had told us she was working on Ebola, but here she is in a US military document working on coronavirus. And she's doing an experiment with live bats with these novel coronaviruses. So that's where my interest really got interested in this woo-woo. I was intrigued by this woman's story not holding up. She's known as the last Western woman in Wuhan. So I don't feel bad for talking about her because it's not really her fault. This was an accident. But I'm going to basically proclaim that she was patient zero. Danielle Anderson was our first victim of many in this COVID-19 pandemic. She was inside this Wuhan BSL-4 experimenting with live bats, with this live coronavirus, with this fear and cleavage site right in the middle of it. And it got out on her watch accidentally. My evidence for that is it's thick, but it's enveloping to the fact where I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the pandemic started in her lab, at least. So what Wuhan provided, now because it started in her lab, I want to make this clear. It doesn't mean it was engineered in her lab. This is where it gets complicated. If something like a genome or a virus is ever engineered, virologists ship it around the world to test it. They freeze it in liquid nitrogen and they ship it around the world in the bottom of a plane, just like any other package. It's basically packed in solid ice, and it's shipped around the world for testing. So this isn't nefarious. All these labs just collaborate. This is Western science, in action. And this BSL-4 in Wuhan was built to invite Western scientists into the Wuhan BSL-4. So this was, open science, good science, hopefully safe science if something like this didn't happen. So just because it started in the Wuhan BSL-4s, which is what I contend, doesn't mean it was engineered or created in the Wuhan BSL-4. It just means she's testing it. She's testing the final product, this prototype, what I call this R&D accident. So she is on the receiving end of this vaccine that's been shipped to her from a U.S. lab. This is where my narrative deviates from most others. If you interview another lab leaker, you'll claim that the Chinese scientist engineered this in a Chinese lab and it got out. And they'll claim that this thing has nothing to do with the Wuhan wet market, which I agree with. But what I don't agree with is that the Chinese scientists, engineered a genome like SARS-2. I actually contend it's impossible for a Chinese scientist to have engineered SARS-2. It's biologically impossible to have engineered a genome like SARS-CoV-2. And if you go through my book, COVID-19 Mystery Solved, there's multiple chapters outlining how that's possible. And to get further into the details of this, if anyone has been interested in the lab leak debate, they probably know of a woman named Xizeng Li. Xizeng Li is the bat lady of Wuhan. That is probably who people know about and have heard about. They don't know about Danielle Anderson, but they will know about Xizeng Li. They are colleagues, not close colleagues, but they are colleagues. They both are what's called bat virologists, essentially. So they're peers, basically, and they work on international projects, and they cross paths in Wuhan like they did in this project. So they are both in Wuhan in 2019. There is Xizeng Li, who's in the Wuhan BSL-2, that is near downtown Wuchang city center. And then you got Danielle Anderson. So when the pandemic started, this is in January 2020. Danielle Anderson has now left Wuhan. She is left without reason in November. The pandemic starts on January 10th of 2020. On January 10th of 2020, there's the first big event for the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. The genome is uploaded. The Chinese scientists have isolated the virus, this mysterious virus circulating in Wuhan, and they have uploaded this genome, this 30,000 nucleotide genome, this signature, if you will, to the databases. And when they upload the signature to the databases, Danielle Anderson's boss, Linfa Wang, stepped down as Duke's emerging infectious disease director. So the boss of Danielle Anderson has now resigned from his position at Duke, essentially, after recognizing the genome that got out on their watch. So he's done the honorable thing and stepped down. Then 2 weeks later, on January 24th of 2020, Xizeng Li, the Bat Lady, emerges onto the international scene, and she uploaded this genome called RATG13. This is why I basically call Xizeng Li the whistleblower. I have announced her to be the brave whistleblower, and I believe she may go down as one of the braver women in science for doing what she did. Because when she uploaded this genome, this RATG13 genome, which is about 96% similar to SARS-2, it's not 100%, but it's a close match. When she did that, she ironically made her own lab the primary suspect of a lab leak, because she had the closest known genome to any woman, to any scientist. So ironically, when she did this, she brought attention to her lab in the BSL-2. She brought hell upon her. So the entire world just descended upon her. You have the closest known genome to SARS-2. You are now our primary suspect. Said every Western scientist, every Western newspaper, every Western reporter. They converged upon her for the irony of her actually, exposing the fact to us, Western virologists in particular, that SARS-2 is engineered. She ironically brought attention to her. Does that make sense? She basically goes down, with this just nightmare of a firestorm brought upon her for doing this pretty brave act. Because when she uploaded this genome that made SARS-2 look engineered, one of the Western scientists wanted her arrested. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. So when I contend that SARS-2 wasn't created or engineered in Wuhan, I'm going to tell you it was engineered in U.S. labs. And one of the two people that I can name names, because it's pretty clear who did this. The guy that created the genome is Xizeng Li's colleague in North Carolina. His name is Ralph Baric. So he's been in Chinese newspapers. Don't worry, the Chinese media know who Ralph Baric is. So he is this coronavirologist. He's basically specializes in coronaviruses for the past 40 years. So he's been doing it since coronaviruses have been around, or at least recognized in circulation. And he's one of the few, if not the only scientist on the planet that could have created a genome like SARS-2, because it's so new, so novel, so different. No one could create anything like this other than him. So this Ralph Baric character is a professor at the University of North Carolina. And he wrote this DARPA, this U.S. military proposal in 2018. And he said, I, Ralph Baric of the University of North Carolina, I'm going to insert the fear and cleavage site, what I just showed you on the back of the book. And I want to test it on live bats in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Why? This is where it gets a little weird, but it's just, it's the Chinese horseshoe bats. This horseshoe bat is this about as big as your fist. and it's very small and very fragile, but it is the source of what's called SARS-1. That virus, that SARS-1 virus, was traced by Xi Jinping, the bat lady of Wuhan, back to Chinese horseshoe bats. And these Chinese horseshoe bats are in the remote Yunnan province, which is about 1,500 kilometers south of Wuhan. But Xi Jinping would go out there from 2005 until 2015 for Ralph Baric, for the NIH in America, for U.S. scientists. She would go out there and collect bat samples from these bats. And one of these bat samples she collected was this RATG13 genome I keep talking about. And she collected this RATG13 genome in 2013, hence the name. So when she collected it, she brought it back to Wuhan, and she didn't do anything with it until 2018. She started to upload it, but she uploaded it to US databases in 2018. So when she starts to upload these genomes to these databases, it gives Western scientists access to them before they're published, which is what happened in this case. Xi Jinping didn't do much of anything to cause any pandemic other than she uploaded this RATG13 genome. She was paid to do this. This is what the US scientists, the US government actually wanted her to do, to go out there to the bats, find these SARS-like samples, collect them, bring them back to Wuhan, sequence them, and then upload them up to the database for scientists like Ralph Baric at the University of North Carolina to download it. And when Baric can download the genome, he can recreate it. He can recreate a Chinese virus in his North Carolina lab. That's how good he is. Xi Jinping could not isolate or create the genome, but Ralph Baric in North Carolina could. So if she uploads it, Ralph Baric can download it. He can create it and modify it and play with it, which is what he wanted to do. He declared this intent to modify this genome, this RATG13 genome, and put a furin cleavage site in it, send it back to Wuhan, send it to Danielle Anderson and the BSL-4, which was safe. You know, it's a higher level security lab. It's more secure. At least that was the idea. No one set out to, blow up the world or whatnot. No one set out to frame the Chinese. Unfortunately, this is kind of what happened. And Danielle Anderson was to experiment with this novel, chimera we now call SARS-2. That was her responsibility. And what Wuhan and Xi Jinping were able to provide were the live bats, the bats where the genome came from. So the genome's taken from the bat. It's uploaded to the database. Ralph Baric downloads, modifies, and then he sends it back to Wuhan. But this time it goes from BSL-2 to Ralph Baric, from Ralph Baric to the BSL-4. It's a little confusing, but that's essentially what happened in this case. And that was the intent of this program, was to try and prevent the bat from producing another SARS-like event. They wanted to vaccinate the bats. And this is what's outlined in this U.S. military proposal called DARPA Diffuse. And it usually ends because DARPA, this U.S. military branch, did not fund the grant. And no, that's true. They did not. But NIH, NIAID, Tony Fauci did. And that's that's where I start the book. And that's where I move us down the path, hopefully, to where the story gets really good, which I don't really want to talk about here because it gets even more crazy when you get into the details of it, because there's more than just North Carolina involved. Tony Fauci, this pope of biodefense in America, is also heavily involved in this. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell. Without overwhelming your viewers and listeners, I am here to tell you with biological fact and 400 pages of evidence, the Chinese scientists did not create SARS-CoV-2, nor did the Wuhan wet market. I have evidence pointing away from the Wuhan wet market and evidence pointing towards, U.S. scientists and away from the Chinese scientists. I did not care who did this. I just wanted to know who did. And over time, it was, more and more documents came out. When I looked at lab leak, let me put it to you. When I looked at the origins, and I always assumed lab leak, because it's just, there's 12 biolabs in Wuhan, and I always assumed it just came from one of them. But I never thought we would figure out which one, because you can't get to the bottom of it. It's no one's going to admit it. The documents, if they exist, are gone. So I thought there was no interest in it. I got interested when the DARPA Diffuse document leaked in 2021. That's late 2021. And all the other lab leakers ignored it. Lab leakers are people that spend time like on Twitter, per se, and they debate the origins down to the nucleotide. And I was one of them, passively paying attention. But when the DARPA Diffuse document leaked, I go, this is big. This is huge. This is now, a 2018 document saying that U.S. scientists are going to create something like SARS-CoV-2, and everyone else just kind of ignored it because I don't even know if they wanted to look that deep into it. But as everyone else ran away from it, I ran towards it, and that really piqued my interest because then that would check a lot of boxes for me. Why were Western scientists covering up something that I believe to be a lab leak in Wuhan? Why would they fight so tooth and nail for that? It just smelled funny. Then I like the story of the guy that leaked the document. His name is Major Joseph Murphy. He's the American hero. If I got Xi Jinping as the Wuhan hero on the Chinese side, I've got Major Joseph Murphy on the American side. He's the American hero in Chapter 7. And he's basically this DARPA fellow. He was an intern at the DARPA military office, which the DARPA is like the brain of the Pentagon. The Pentagon is this. We all know the Pentagon. It's the U.S. military fort. But inside this fort of the U.S. military is this small, nimble entity called DARPA. Defense. I can't even give you the name of the acronym out loud. But it's basically like Google, Siri. Drones, drone warfare, machine guns, all these dual use technologies that come out of this tiny little nimble, department called DARPA. And Major Murphy was a fellow, an intern there. And he smelled a rat, an American rat, basically involved in this. I don't know how, but he's sitting in the back of the DARPA rooms, as he wrote in his letter, and he pieced it together. And he noticed that there's immune evasion in this genome, or this virus. And he says immune evasion is like asymptomatic spread. We spread the virus without knowing we have it. He saw that was a very weird feature of SARS-CoV-2, the asymptomatic spread. And it led a lot of lab leakers like myself to assume bioweapon. That's where, people get their PLA, Chinese military, that's the brain just starts going into overdrive when they see immune evasion, because there's really nothing moral about immune evasion. Well, there is. In a vaccine, scientists design immune evasion, asymptomatic spread. That is a feature, not a bug. In an animal vaccine, in particular, in a self-spreading animal vaccine, you want immune evasion. Immune evasion means the virus does not trigger the immune system. Now, it wasn't a human immune system it was designed for. It was a bat's immune system, a mammal just like you and me, basically. But we have a very similar immune system. This is why virologists love studying bats. So there was the virus, the vaccine was designed to evade the immune system, so it would keep spreading and keep shedding. So that was a feature, not a bug. And that's what Major Joseph Murphy in the DARPA department picked up on. And he found the DARPA document and he wrote his letter saying it's an American created recombinant bat vaccine. And I go, this guy is, onto something. And the only thing he had wrong in his theory about the American created bat vaccine was it doesn't affect bats. That's what he said. And I go, well, it doesn't affect Chinese horseshoe bats, but it does affect American lab bats. That's what I brought to the table. That's my biological evidence for this thing being a U.S. lab creation. SARS-CoV-2 does not infect Chinese bats. Even though it allegedly came from a Chinese bat, like a Chinese horseshoe bat, it does not infect them. I've asked British bat biologists living in China, 2 of them in particular, I won't say who, does it. And they have not answered, because it doesn't, because no one's tested it. Because if someone did prove that it did, they would gladly publish the results. So no one anywhere in China or anywhere in the world has proven that SARS-2 infects Chinese bats. But SARS-2 does infect American lab bats. That's my evidence that I propose to you at the beginning and the middle of the end of the book. There's this particular bat. I won't name it, but it's a special bat. It's an American bat, a fat, easy to breed, easy to feed kind of bat. It's like a low maintenance bat that you don't have to keep up, with a lot of, high work and high maintenance. So this particular bat is kept in biolabs, in U.S. biolabs, in particular, Tony Fauci's biolab. It's an info war. There's no doubt about that. It's a full on info war. There was a Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in the 80s. Cold War meaning no shots were fired, but they were kind of like playing spy games amongst each other, hot air balloons, big, jets, big, rockets, going to the moon. That was the Cold War. With China and the US, it's going to be an info war, maybe a tariff war. It's going to be some other kind of hybrid war, but I don't think it's going to be biowarfare. No, I mean, biowarfare is, it's not effective. It's just really not. We've seen that happen. I mean, everyone's economy was screwed up by this. Everyone's people died because of this. Everyone was infected because of this. You cannot control the genome once it's out of the box. I mean, biowarfare is just not effective because it's not targeted, so it's not an effective warfare apparatus. Don't get me wrong, it was done. I think, there's a nasty history with the Japanese and the Chinese, and there's a nasty history between the US and Cubans. 731, we all know about the Japanese lab, and there's something similar going on with the US and Cubans. So Cuba is this island right off the coast of Florida. So we've done some nasty, the Americans have done some nasty bio warfare, or talked about doing some nasty germ warfare, like kill the crops kind of thing, starve the people. Unless Fidel Castro goes over. So I think biowarfare had its place. It was about 50 years ago. I don't think there's anything like that war, but I think you nailed it, Woo. I think it's an info war. I think that's essentially what it is. We are stuck in an info war, and on the American side, it's tariff the Chinese because they're going to take your job. On the Chinese side, it's why are you taxing us? We provide you goods and services. So I think right now it's a bit of an info war, and I think. I don't know what happens, to be honest with you. I mean, who knows? I mean, I would never have thought Trump would get, into office and level tariffs, like this. And like you saw what happened. The whole market just it totally implodes. At least the stock market does. And I don't think he cares, if you want to know what Donald Trump is, I don't want to talk politics too much, but he's what's called an isolationist. He's basically, a person that he has dovish tendencies. So let's not think that he wants war with China. But he does want a trade war with China. There's obviously something about that. He wants an info war with them. He sees China as a competitor. And I think, people like Jeff Sachs try to explain the way capitalism and free markets work pretty well. It's called trade. It's mutually beneficial. It's essentially called the division of labor, and comparative advantage is the term I think that Jeff Sachs will throw out as an economist. But you have to be an economist to know that. You have to study goods and services crossing borders and how it's better off this way. So a lot of Americans have been told the Chinese labor has taken your job. And it's a very popular political slogan. And it gets you elected to office, woo. Look what happened. Trump gets back in office. And not only is it important, it's important in what's called the swing states like Missouri and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Indiana. These are factory towns, or at least they were at one point. And you when you campaign in there as a president, you have to win the states. Like Florida and Texas don't really matter because they're always going to vote Republican. And the way you get their vote is you say, I'm going to tax the Chinese. We're not going to lose these factory jobs anymore. It doesn't make any sense. It never did. It never will. The factory job's gone to a more efficient place, whether it's China or Vietnam or Mexico. Most of the jobs have gone to Mexico. All those factory jobs, they're in Mexico and Canada too. So, not only is he taxing the Chinese, he was taxing Canada at one time. That's incredible. The biggest trade partner isn't China, it's Canada. It's just trillions of dollars in goods probably that go across that border over time. So, don't get too sucked into our politics. It's entertaining. I'll admit that. I think Donald Trump's all bark, no bite. I think that's essentially it. Like he's a dog that'll bark, but he won't actually bite you. So I would take none of this personally. I would take none of it, as any more serious than a politician just looking to say something to get a vote, really, which is unfortunate. A good voter is a terrible economist. So that's what Jeff Sachs is up against. He's trying to educate the world about the way economics works, and he does a good job explaining what is it, the trade imbalance. Essentially, America consumes more than it produces, so there's a trade imbalance. So we consume more Chinese goods than we produce. America does export. It does export like services, lawyers, COVID. Jet fighters and whatnot. But there is, movies, entertainment, Netflix, so there are exports there. It's more on the service side, apparently. We're all salesmen in America. We're all, selling something in America. That's essentially what we are, a bunch of talking heads at this point. We don't produce much of anything anymore. I can't say that, I've worked with some great American companies that produce some really good products. So you can really, be proud of that, I guess, from my perspective.